All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CO channel. This is John the Bomb. Building others means business. And I've got a powerhouse named Myles Powell. He's doing things in the comfort food space. Let me tell you a little bit about Myles. So, a fresh take on familiar favorites. Myles Comfort Foods took the universally beloved, and we all love it, the mac and cheese aisle, and reimagined it, right? Their vision is protein packed premium and comfort focused, creating with what Myles calls a comfort moment in the middle of chaos. So, ready in just a few minutes. Myles, thank you for bringing this to the world, my man. Myles Comfort Foods, how are you today? And thank you for coming on the Go for CO channel.
John, I'm great, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to talk about mac and cheese and entrepreneurship.
I love it. I love it, man. Our audience always loves hearing kind of those beginning stages, that ideation, were you in the industry, were you and your family thinking about ideas and creativity, and then all of a sudden it popped up. But tell us a little bit about that journey of that beginning stages of where Myles Comfort started from.
It started very early, and I didn't even know it started because for me, growing up, the dinner table was just such a special place. I mean, it was everything the big moments, the small moments, and it was that being surrounded by family and great tasting food that made me and molded me into the person I became. But fun fact, I'm a civil engineer by trade. Went to school for it. And I remember graduating with this degree in hand. You can see actually behind me. And the level of excitement just went to zero. It was like, I don't, I don't, this doesn't feel right. Like there's something missing. And I naturally just traveled to the kitchen and I just started cooking recipes that reminded me of home. And it just felt like such a, it was what something I look forward to every day after work was going home and cooking just for myself. So much so, I actually joined the Food Network competition called America's Best Cook. And this is fresh out of college. Spoiler alert, didn't make it past episode one. Got a quick boot, but I came home from that show and I went, yeah, I got to do something in food. And that's what really started this whole journey of creating a food business.
Neat, neat. Well, planted seeds of greatness. I believe in that so much, right? I have the 5 F's that I talk about. What's called faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun. And for me, a perspective is, all of us are planted with some sort of seed of greatness, right? But we take a direction that maybe isn't, towards that space or that power. But it sounds like you kind of flourished in something that you got something done with your degree, and now you found a little bit of a passion play and those pursuits. So tell us, obviously you went on the show, got booted off quickly, but it didn't stop you, which is a great mindset, right? A go for CO mindset. What was the next few steps that you took to start to realize the culmination of starting Myles Foods?
There was a lot of early iterations of just trying to figure out how I was going to bring food in and start a business. I ended up getting my MBA, but at that time I launched a barbecue sauce company and I just launched that through the means, I call it the means of Google, right? I Googled everything, how to trademark, how to build a brand, all these things. And just like bit by bit, brick by brick, end up launching this LLC back in 2015. The notion was, hey, I make a killer barbecue sauce that's made with a real fruit and it's natural and all these things. It's not there's nothing like it on the market. I'm going to sell it to as many people as possible without having any idea what CPG actually was. And so I was on Etsy. I was trying to do wholesale, and keep in mind, I was still doing this while working as a full time engineer. So I would, wake up, go to work. 5 o'clock would hit. I would go to the kitchen, make a bunch of barbecue sauce, sell it online, and then start the whole process over again. So it was a very much rise and grind every day kind of thing. And I did that for years actually, just trying to figure out how to build this business to become sustainable. Very difficult without the knowledge of what CPG really entails, but it was that passion of mine for food in general and this vision that I had of being, I'll call it a movement maker in the industry, that I went, I'm going to figure this out one way or the other.
Neat, neat. And was it all testing in your own kitchen, or did you start to say, "Hey, were you starting to use some ghost kitchens or any suppliers and people that were starting to bring into the mix as you were kind of developing this, opportunity?
Yeah, the first 6 months to a year was all done in the kitchen. I was sending out samples to friends and family, getting their feedback, iterating. But then it got to a point when I realized, well, if I'm going to be on retail shelves, I got to get a ghost slash commercial kitchen. I was very fortunate at the time that I found a culinary institute not too far away that would open up their doors for me at night to use their kitchen because the students weren't using it. Uh, I say very lucky because it was very cheap, like in a good way, right? And I didn't have any startup capital, so it was like, hey, this got to be as cheap as possible for this to work. So I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. That allowed me to kind of build a small customer base while keeping my overhead pretty low. Now, obviously, as things grew, we ended up switching to a different product line as I put on my big boy pants. And that's when we're talking about full scale production with pallets and all that stuff. I call that phase two. That went from, hey, this is a hobby to a business, right? And that's when everything really changes in the moment.
Okay. Well, look, there's a lot of people in America and around the world, right, have kind of that side hustle per se. In this time frame of now committing to this, more affordable space, a little bit bigger, kind of beta testing, A, B, C testing with your family and some other people. What were some of the criterias that you said to yourself, okay, hey, here, I've got something good? Was it 4 out of 10 people loved it, 7 out of 10? Was it a 10 out of 10? And then you kept that product, or what was those developments in R&D space, of that part process?
It's a bit tricky because I was getting 10 out of 10s, but the
Oh.
trick is that it was with people that I knew. And that tends to be watered down feedback, right?
Yeah.
And so the real test came when I was putting it on the marketplace and people that I didn't know were buying it, right? And I was getting comments saying this is amazing. That was when I realized, okay, this is something that is actually something, right? It's so, and that's a really big step. Um, I'll tell you what though, there was a transition period, and hopefully I'm not skipping ahead here, where I had been doing this for a couple of years while still working as an engineer. And I had this, I was so fascinated with the thought of being a full-time entrepreneur, right? I mean, owning your own schedule, building a brand, it seems so alluring. So 2017, I decided I'm going to quit engineering without really a parachute, and I'm going to dive straight headfirst into full-time entrepreneurship. I quickly realized that at the time I wasn't really ready for the responsibility of entrepreneurship on a full-time level, where I was more in love with the allure of it as opposed to what that does to you mentally and the pressure it puts on you. So very quickly I went broke. I mean, I was not prioritizing right. There were things that I should have been doing that I wasn't doing because I had freedom of schedule, and I never had that obviously my entire life, right? So it was now where I said, okay, it was like the world was telling me you better shape up, right? Or this is going to go downhill really fast. And it did. I ended up going back into full-time entrepreneurship. I'm sorry, full-time engineering because I needed income. But it was that transition back that really helped me fortify my strategy because I went, okay, I've had a taste of what that's like. I didn't do it right, but now I can refocus and reshuffle and really, make the right moves in the market so that I can be in that position a little better off, but later down the road.
And you know what? We can all learn from that, right? Sometimes you take that giant leap and stub your toe or fall flat on your face, and that's okay too, right? You were able to pivot back to the base, right? Which you created a base, you created an education, an MBA, something that you could fall back on per se, right? But you had this desire to be an entrepreneur, and now you learned something from that first go at the apple. So now you're back, and you're kind of playing both realms again, right? 9 to 5 and 5 to 9 type of scenario, in that mindset. What was kind of the breakthrough? What allowed you to say, okay, now I've developed a different type of food that can hit the marketplace, and did you go to maybe some local chambers to link up with some people? Did you align yourself with some people that were from CPG? What were some of the strategies that you used at that point?
It was, I mean, it was everything, right? Because at this point, I've been doing this for a few years, and I'm beginning to build a network of people in the industry. At the same time, our retail partners are growing. So it's just not, I'm not talking about 10 to 12 stores. We're talking about 50, 100, 200 stores. And then we end up getting on shelves at Whole Foods, right? And then the big one was Target. So when Target decided to bring us in, it became very difficult to balance all of that stuff and still be an engineer. But our biggest break was when we had shifted from uh, PM production that I could be there to all day production, which was tough because I had to be in the office and I had someone else making the product for me, right? But it was very hard to manage wearing two hats at the same time. And I'm doing investor calls, and because I'm still working as an engineer, I'm doing investor calls during lunch breaks on my car. Like they were things became so uh they were competing against each other. And I was being stretched way too thin. I was starting to burn out a lot. You know, I was getting a little older, but I say little older. I'm still late 20s, but I wasn't. My I'm feeling the effects, right, of working of two things at the same time. So, I think for us, we got to the point of it was do or die. You know, we had made some mistakes because I wasn't dedicating enough time to it from a quality control standpoint. There were missed opportunities, and I said, well, if I don't make this leap, the business is gonna just stay flat and probably just crash because there's not enough to it. I need to take another leap of faith moment. And at that point in my life, I had 7 years of experience. And so I knew a lot more and I had a better understanding of how to grow a brand and how to grow a business. And I had a bunch of resources at my disposal. And then when I made that jump, it wasn't now like, oh, I'm doing this because I want my own schedule. I want to do what I want. It was because I know the tools that I need and effort I need to apply to actually grow this brand.
Yeah, no, you had a mind shift, a paradigm shift, right? And those that have been, I guess, inundated over the last probably 5, 10, 15 years, especially with social media. Hey, entrepreneurship is great. You own the time. You can do whatever you want. No, no, that's not true. You're going to be working. It's almost 24/7 at the beginning, and setting up your processes and how's your operations going to go and where's the funding coming from. Do you obviously go out and get investor capital, or do you go to get some debt with SBA and some other tools that are out there, wearing my commercial banking hat. So tell us, I guess, from that point, right, it had kind of been in and out, still developing different products and services. What was, let's go back just a little bit again. You're selling kind of in the marketplace. Did you start the selling through like farmers markets? Did you sell it through maybe a couple boutique locations? What was that structure? Because to go from this 7-year journey to Target and Whole Foods, that's a big leap. So give us a little bit more
Yep.
information on that to share with the audience on that.
It was still this brick by brick format. Like I remember we were in DC and we had our first retailer in DC that said, we want your product. And it was a one location retailer, but it was like our first one with, I'll call it notoriety. It wasn't like the mom and pop corner shop. It was like an actual grocery store. And we built on that, right? We got that one. Then we picked up a second and the third. And then it was, we got it to a point of like 10 to 15. Then we got to 20. Once we got to 20, I had enough sales coming in that I can go to a distribution partner and say, hey, we're already selling to these folks. If we sell to you directly, can we now utilize your resources to sell to your customers? And so we went from the 20 to eventually like 100 stores. But that was done, primarily through my own sales efforts and the efforts of the distribution partner. And because they had a relationship with Whole Foods and all these brands that I eventually wanted to be in. So nothing was overnight. Don't get me wrong. It was still door knocking, cold email, and cold calling, and you're just building this portfolio one location at a time to the point where you have enough where you start to approach the Whole Foods, the Targets of the world, and they're seeing this emerging local brand getting some attention. And now I can go, all right, I'm ready for the big leagues, right? Hindsight, I wasn't. But from portfolio standpoint, we had now the momentum to approach those guys. And then Once you enter into that space, that's the big CPG space, it's a whole nother level because you're not treated as the local brand, right? Now you're treated as a brand that's on shelves with Coca-Cola and all these other big time players, right? So and I'll tell you what, that's when I had to make that jump because you know, things as simple as paperwork onboarding with the retailer is like a full-time job. So that's when I knew, hey, I got to put some more time to this. I don't have the capital to hire a full-time staff. It's me. So I got to put full-time effort into this thing.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good transition, right? You were in this kind of hobby business mindset, hey, glorified entrepreneur. It's going to be so cool. I can control everything. And then all of a sudden get smacked in the face with a little bit of reality and had some tough times, then came back to the JOB, right? But, use that capital from having an employment and then also building your brand to then forge to the next level. So, let's talk about that transition, right? You talk about co-packing, commercial, kitchen. What were the things that you started seeing? Because obviously you weren't necessarily cooking in the kitchen every day. What were some of the ways that you set up recipes, that you had checkpoints with these people? And then when did you hire the first few people to start helping you? Was it in distribution, or did you set up a network of vendors that kind of helped you build a business while you were a solopreneur?
So when I had right after I quit the second time, I immediately turned into full-time production because we needed it, right? So I was showing up at the kitchen 7 in the morning, leaving at 6 at night. And it was a day shift and a night shift. And I was essentially the CEO and the production manager. In an ideal world, I would have had a production manager there and I would have been able to do the sales and the marketing on the side. But once again, didn't have the capital. And with CPG, it's very hard to bring in early stage capital without significant traction, as opposed to like the tech field or AI now, where an idea can grant you $5 million in funding. CPG is like, hey, you better be doing a 500,000 in revenue before we give you a check, right? So I knew I knew I didn't have the ability to bring in that type of funding, and I didn't even know how at the time. So I was doing that. I was doing both roles, and the downside is that by being the production manager, I didn't have the time dedicated to marketing and branding, which is very important early on. But I was still doing it, right? So I'm doing investor calls with my kitchen hat and my thing on, you know. But now I'm fully ingratiated in every aspect of the business, right? At that time, we had an accountant, thankfully, so I wasn't reconciling my books. Um, I'd hired an interns for the sales piece, so we're doing some collaboration from the sales front, a little bit of social media stuff. So I'm bringing in resources on a smaller level, nothing full time, but just fractional or part time help that helps us build this brand, knowing that I'm spending so much time stirring a pot of mac and cheese with my team.
All right. So, look, this is a perspective Go for Sale community of starting to use resources when or becoming resourceful when the resources aren't as big, right? Utilizing tools and people. What were some of those things that were operationally starting to, become a clue, right? Like, all right, hey, from 9 to 5, I need to have a certain amount of production based on the purchase orders coming in. I'm going to have to turn out this amount of production. What were some of those metrics that meant a lot to you in those beginning stages, especially that second time coming through?
It was the understanding of the flow of purchase orders, right? So it was an understanding the lead time for ingredients, what I need to have in inventory on hand. You know, max production levels was important because we knew we could make X amount of pallets on a max level per shift. And you look at your retail footprint and you say, okay, they typically order X amount, our distributor orders X amount per month. Can I sustain that? And that becomes a real problem in that stage because I'm still in the shared kitchen. And so I am reliant on availability, right? I come to the kitchen. If someone's using my equipment, I can't, it's not my equipment. So there were so many headaches that came to either down equipment or lack of storage space. And when that impacts your ability to fulfill retail, we were like, okay, we got to find an alternative route. And that's when co-packing came into the mix. Now, co-packing we knew was equally opportunistic, but also very dangerous because that relationship is very important. And there's not a lot of co-packers that operate with small brands like ours. So we hit the streets and we asked everyone we knew, who could make this product for us. And we knew that transition would have to come because we got accepted by Sprouts. And Sprouts is a nationwide customer, biggest customer we had ever had. And we said, hey, we can't make that much product in house no matter how many hours I put into it. We got to bring in a co-packer. And so we spent months finding one. We finally did. We transitioned out of the commercial, the shared kitchen space and started co-packing. And now my time opens up to what I feel like is now running a business and not running a kitchen, which is a substantial shift.
And that's one of those magic moments, right? In business, you talk about being in the business or being on the business, right? You all of a sudden transition, but it's really interesting, right? You have this time frame where you go in and out, come back, you take that second leap of faith, but now you have some consistency in the background and you have some real knowledge over the last 7 years that you said that you developed, right? And it takes time, go for your community. A lot of times you want to quit, right? In those first 2, 3 years, with a setback like Myles had and going broke per se, right? But he leaned back on something that he knew and reestablished himself, reconnected with some of those things and values that he knew that would succeed in the future, and now had based knowledge on the things that you had done before. So now, all right, we've started to get into a little bit of the big leagues. You get the co-packing, you got some things rolling, you got these major retailers asking for business. What were some of the ways that you saw that you prevented, disruption instead of, we're worrying about reacting in that scenario?
That error was so much trial by fire. It was feeling as though almost overwhelmed with what it takes to succeed in this industry because the misconception is retailer A knocks on your door, says you want product, you win. That's a misconception. Them knocking on your door is like essentially stepping up to the batter's box. Getting on shelf is like getting to first base. There's no run scored until you sell that product. So it was such a learning curve of figuring out what it takes to actually sell a product once it hits shelf. And also realizing that every retailer is not your retailer, right? And I learned all that the hard way. We'd be on shelves and it's not selling. And I realized it's because it's not our audience. So we ended up being in a position where we just kind of we weren't doing enough to be disruptive, right? I mean, our perception of our brand was not the perception that the public was seeing because they don't know our brand. And we started looking at ourselves and saying, hey, something's not right. We've got distribution, but that's not enough. Like we don't have a established community right now. And that's something we consistently work on, right? And we understand now we're understanding how much of a role consumer psychology plays into this whole game, where consumers aren't black and white. I mean, they are it's think about it as a consumer yourself. The decision purchases you make are fragmented and confusing. It's never the same day. So this is the stage of learning the difficulties to this industry, and then you're also seeing case studies of brands that have done it really well. And you're like, that's so smart. They either talk about their brand this way or they presented themselves this way. But now I'm seeing a lot of brands fail. Some of these brands that I thought were the cream of the crop, they close shop. And I'm like, oh, so you're starting to really get an understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and what you need to do to be one of one on shelf. And for me, it was that period that I learned. I'm still learning, right? But it was that period where it was like I hate to use this metaphor, but it's like being on a battlefield, right? And you're all charging, and your buddies are getting picked off one by one, and you're dodging bullets, and you're like, all right, I gotta figure this out because the next bullet could have my name on it, and it's you feel the pressure, right? But every time you keep moving forward, you feel like okay, all right, something's going right, So that was it's quite difficult, but it's exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah, you have those moments, right? Obviously, one question for me would be, who did you surround yourself in those moments, over that journey and now? Do you have maybe two, three people that you kind of go to? Do you have an advisory board that you've, put together per se? And maybe they don't have a piece of equity, but they're trusted advisors around you, right? Obviously, shamelessly, I say, as a commercial banker, I always like to say, if you have a great accountant, a great attorney, and a great commercial banker, you could have a semblance of a good team in front of you, and then you go get those industry experts that maybe are retired CEOs, retired CFOs, retired C-suites, or even production managers that put some things into your ear to make sure that you're on the right path. So who did you put around you in the last 2, 3 years?
I've got an advisor that he's not CPG specialty, but he is business. He's strong on the business front, and he has been able to guide me through some very difficult moments, right, where I'm just frustrated and flustered. And then I've got some peers of mine that I really respect that have done really well. And I'll call them up and just tell them what's going on, and they will be able to take an outside perspective and a very raw perspective, which is really important. They'll dissect the brand and the approach, and they'll call the baby ugly if it's ugly. But that's what you need to hear when you're in this space. LinkedIn is a great source for that. I made a lot of connections off of there that are in the industry. And like I said, there's a couple folks that know this game really well that I'll pick up the phone and just say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And they just provide such unique guidance. And I can't tell you how important that is when you're trying to figure this out, because a lot of us small brands are in the same boat. We're all navigating the same treacherous waters. And I've had so many conversations where it's one sentence or one moment where I'm just like, light bulb, right? Or it's like, okay, I would have never been able to figure that out myself. I'm so glad you said that. Um, so between them, advisors, and I think this is an industry where people just love giving advice. And so if I were to go on LinkedIn right now and pose a question, I would probably get 20 different answers, right? But that's all, I call it brain juice. It helps me like kind of take all of my thoughts and parse them in a way where I can have a creative solution.
Okay. All right. So I like that. You're using a tool out there like LinkedIn with some experts out there. I know sometimes it could be a little bit overwhelming, right? When you have too many answers and then you don't know,
Yeah.
you get stymied, right? Of what do I do next if it's four or five different directions and only three or four of those 20 agree, and they're in pockets of certain solutions, right? Stuff like that. So let's transition to now. Sounds like for the first 7 years it was kind of bootstrapping. Obviously a guy that
Yep.
went out and got his MBA and those types of things in civil engineering. I'm sure that there was a good base salary in the job, right? So maybe it funded some things, and it sounded like you had some maybe family that participated in the funding side. But what was that side of it? Because as you've mentioned, CPG can be a cash flow constraint. Purchase orders look good on paper, but if that cash flow is not coming in from the backside, you can't produce enough product to then match up to the PO. So to walk us through the bootstrapping, and did you ever go into a situation where now you either raise more capital or set up debt to be able to be a component of it?
For the first 5 years, I was very naive to this space where I thought the business was just cash flow all the time and that'll sustain the business. Around 2018 was when I first got introduced to crowdfunding. That was the first time where I was considering actual capital from outside of internal resources. Um, I raised not a lot, maybe 60 grand through crowdfunding for the first year or so of doing it. And then, we had reached out to some banking solutions, but we were still very small. And so what we were getting was not much of anything. And not being profitable, as you know, very hard to get a business loan when you're not profitable. And so around 2019, 2020 is when I first started digging into angel investing, and just this idea of having a pitch deck and pitching investors, right? And I'm learning the art of pitching. What do you say? What do you not say? How to craft a great pitch deck. So then around 2021 was the first time I'm starting to actually receive angel checks. Small angel checks, but nonetheless they were starting to come in little by little. And now I am fully in investor mode, right? I understand the cycle, right? You go through pre-seed, then seed, then Series A. I'm learning all these things not only through my own efforts, but I'm doing accelerator programs that are teaching about the fundraising journey. My pitch deck has changed, is constantly being evolved. I'm doing pitch competitions, right? Now my brain is split between sales and investor relations, right? And so I'm doing both at the same time, and I'm learning a lot from feedback from investors. Like my first pitch deck was atrocious. I mean, absolutely gross. And I'm learning now. Like now, I feel like I have the perfect version of that. Um, and funny enough, the moment that I got good at angel pitching was the moment the market turned, right? So it was really bad timing of like, well, the capital is dried up. But that period helped me learn really how to pitch an angel or a VC group because you learn when times are tough. So it's one of those things where we are always pitching because capital is such a requirement in this industry, especially early on. And so we ended up raising, $1.5 million, but it took 3 years because we kind of raised it in small pieces, and we're still raising. But yeah, it has been tough, needless to say, to raise capital in this environment, especially in CPG. But I learned some of the major tactics and what it takes to actually bring in investment.
No, and it's true. I mean, the cap table starts to become interesting as well. So let's go into that. As you've raised it, did you already set determine a percentage, or did you let that marketplace tell you, okay, hey, based on this valuation, I'm going to give up X amount of percentage, or was there a convertible debt scenario to it?
All convertible. We were still so early. We didn't know, and we really couldn't evaluate the company with like data to back it up, because we're still way too early. So everything's been on a convertible. We picked an evaluation cap. One of my board members actually suggested it, and as something that was smart, right? Because once again, this is food, it's not tech. And food, you don't have $20 million valuation caps at seed, right? They're a lot lower. And now we're thinking about, okay, what happens when we close this round? Or how do we're learning about waterfall analysis. What does my equity end up being once things convert? If we do a series A, what's that going to look like? And how does that impact the cap table? Like I am now pulling out my finance bag and just really looking at the numbers and understanding that I actually got a really good piece of advice from someone that's in the founder space. And they were like, listen, your first company, your cap table is probably not going to be what you expected. Your goal at the end of the day is to exit with at least a small bit of equity in the place, right? It may not be what you want, but it's something. And now the next time you go out and raise money, because you've had an exit, you'll be in a more negotiating position and you can put yourself in a better position. But don't put yourself in so much pressure where you're like, I have to be at 60% ownership when I exit, right? So my mindset was like, hey, at all costs, bring in capital, make sure it's not predatory. Um, yes, your cap table is very important to your investors, but at the end of the day, you need fuel, you need capital.
No, it's huge. I mean, depending on the industry, right? That can be the make or break of how you get, to the next level. So, interesting transition here from that side of things to what you did really for 8 or 9 years, which is sales and market, right? Nice that you were able to kind of put yourself in a position to be on the business instead of in the business when you moved over to that co-packing situation. So what has the sales and marketing been? How has packaging changed over the years? What have you looked at from a social perspective that maybe intrigued the market to say, oh, I like that difference? I know just recently in a recent news thing, Cracker Barrel changed their logo, and it did not go well. So, some of the traditionalists did not like it. So, in a small scenario, it still is very impactful, right? People know you for the colors, for the images that you use, for you, the individual. Myles Powell is a founder, and how you put yourself out there in the marketplace. So, what were some of those dynamics?
It's I think what happens is as brand owners, we get super obsessed with product attributes. When you'll see it now with protein, right? Protein is literally everywhere. We were in a position where we created this product, it was naturally high in protein, but we didn't talk about it because no one really was talking about protein years ago. But the downside to all of this is that a lot of these brands are going to make protein their number one claim to fame. And just like everything else, protein is a trend. In a couple years, we're going to be talking about fiber or something different. And if your only stake in the game is you're high in protein, but when the trend shifts, so does all your customers. So one of our lessons early on was build a strong brand that is independent of the product attributes. You want people to fall in love with your store, your brand, like everything about the essence of what you are, so that you can always talk, it's evergreen, right? You can always talk about it and always use that as a way to attract more consumers. Um, another piece of advice I got is that brands aren't known, like early stage brands aren't known for their logo or their packaging, right? They're known for their branding. How many times have you had something you're like, oh, I had this thing, it was really good, but I don't remember what it looked like or what it was called? Exactly, right? And like someone said once that like if you think of the legacy brands like Nike logo sucks. Not in the sense of like from a design standpoint, it's nothing special. So when Nike first came out, no one was like, "Yo, I love that brand because they're a cool logo." No, no, you love the brand because of the brand. The logo is a function of that. And so as a founder, you think the same thing. Don't spend all of your attention on branding, right? I'm sorry, on design logo. Packaging is important, but packaging does not sell your product, right? Everything that's surrounding it does. It's just a part of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so let me be a little bit of a devil's advocate, right? When I'm looking at the store, right, and I actually do the buying in my family. I go to Whole Foods and Costco and these places. I will say, from that consumer standpoint, at that middle level, and I'll bring up a competitor, like I don't know if they're a true competitor, but like Annie's. All right.
Yeah.
So Annie's has a pretty good presence in Whole Foods. And initially, I was looking at it, yeah, there's certain colors that attracted me, but it was some of the writing on there. I love, we try to be organic and clean, and some of the things that or most of the things that we buy for our family. So, give us a little bit of that impact. How
Yep.
Miles Food Comfort, like what what has it been five or six different iterations, or have you
Yep.
stayed consistent and not necessarily use that as the major piece because maybe you're doing point of sale stuff while people are in the grocery store?
We've definitely done some different product packaging iterations, and for us being in frozen, the challenge is that those doors get frosty. So as you're walking down the aisle, you could have a really great packaging, but if someone before you open the door and close it, now it's frosted over, you may not even see it. And it's
Yeah, so packaging, go ahead.
Yep. So we have definitely done multiple iterations of packaging. And I think for us, there's a fine line that we're still trying to figure out is how do you stand out in a crowded space without being too obscure, right? So how do you get someone to stop walking when they're walking down the aisle? So I guess to backtrack, yes, packaging is very important, but it is not the end all be all. I think some people think, oh, if I have a pretty package, it'll sell really well. And if you look at Graza, right, the olive oil brand, they by having the plastic bottle in a glass space, very unique. If they didn't do their huge social media influencer push, they would not be where they are today, right? So it's like it's just one of your things in your tool belt where you can't rely all on packaging. But for us, it's if you I do this all the time. I'll be in the grocery store and I just like take a step back and I look at all the options and I go, this is really overwhelming for a consumer. And there's studies out there that show where the eyes go to and like how the eyes trace on certain parts of the packaging. It's very hard, right? So you got to think back to, hey, what is my consumer's main concern? And how can I communicate that to them the most direct and effective way possible so that when they're walking down the aisle, it's like a glass in the sand. It just catches their attention just for a split second and they go, huh. And now they open up the door and check it out.
Nate. All right, so let's continue down that path. You were talking about packaging, but then now before that is some sales and marketing, maybe some things, some community that you targeted and found that was kind of like your avatar consumer. What were some of the ways that you approached that market of consumers so that they knew, okay, let's go to Sprouts, or let's go to Whole Foods, or let's go to the boutique places that have Miles Comfort Foods in there?
Early on, it's so important to be founder present.
Mm.
Um, I'm at the point now where I can cold call retailers all day and probably have a pretty high success rate. But once again, that only pushes the needle so far. I got to talk to the end user consumer.
Mm.
And there is not a single social media post that I can do that would outweigh me setting up a table and a demo at a store and giving out product or giving out samples. Nothing beats it. As much as it's time consuming and sometimes just not a good time, it is by far the most effective way of communication. So the
Mm.
question becomes, how do you put yourself as the founder in various positions where your consumer is? Because it doesn't have to be where they're shopping. It could be at an event, it could be at a speaking engagement. Wherever it is, you're showing up and reminding them, hey, I do this thing that I think you would really like. And where are you doing it? Like, for instance, we've done events at like mommy groups, we've done events at fitness things, right? You're trying to figure out, where do I have the most impact? Where do people become the most excited about what we bring? The good thing about mac and cheese is that it's just such a good, great comfort food that after first bite, the brain goes, I need more of that. I'm gonna remember where I can find this. Um, but that's the heart of social sales and marketing early on, is building local community, right? Is you want people to talk about you. And like I said, if I go on social and post my product photo, not a single soul is going to care, not at all, because it's an advertisement. But if I'm out somewhere and I'm talking about it, I'm shaking hands, people are going to remember that, and that's what actually drives retail sales.
Hmm. I was kind of imagining while you were talking because I'm hungry right now. So I was kind of imagining on like on LinkedIn or somewhere, starting to spoon that mac and cheese and it's drippy a little bit, and you just put in your mouth, and man, that sensation of the cheese and the taste, and all this. And if you have different types of flavors, all that type of stuff. So awesome. All right, before I go crazy there, so CEO, right? Client experience, really engagement is E, and then O is operational excellence. I know from a client experience, right? The consumer is, like you said, either kind of seeing you at a show, or tasting your food, but then they go to the consumer, to the marketplace, right? And they go buy. You have an online presence direct to consumer as well, or is it only through retailers?
Only through retailers.
Okay. So from a client experience, a little bit different than a product or service or stuff like that. But what is client experience when you think about Miles Comfort Foods? I guess the journey of like, hey, opening up the package, unsealing it, microwaving or air fry, air oven or whatever. What is that sensation that you want to share today with the Gopher Studio community for Miles Comfort Foods?
It's this sense of, I think you mentioned it early on, this break from the chaos. It's this sense of feeling mentally great in the moment, right? And I personally believe in this because I do this quite often, where bad day, good day, whatever the case might be, I'm gonna crack open up some mac and cheese, put it in the microwave, and I take that first bite, and it's like everything else just kind of slows down, right? And it's like it's me and the mac, and it tastes amazing, and it taps into nostalgia, and it taps into all these inner feelings that make you feel better. It's 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 talking about that very moment and showcasing to other people that this is a moment you can have for yourself too. There's a ton of brands that focus on, I call it like highlighting the moment, that are the reason they do so well. Famously Red Bull, right? A lot of the energy drinks do that extremely well. Nike. The funny, like, there's so many case studies where you see these brands, they don't say a thing about their product attributes, right? Have you ever seen a Nike commercial recently that's like, we make the softest t-shirts? Nope. It's like it's putting, and Patagonia is famous for this. They they show the consumer the experience of their product, so that the consumer says, I want that experience too. And the brain naturally says, in order to have that experience, I need that product. And
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to do with our mac and cheese. Is say, I want that. I want that moment in my life. And it looks like that mac and cheese is the gateway to that moment. And doing that on shelf is very hard, right? It's hard to communicate that kind of creativity through a front of the package. And that's why I say it comes through everything else, through the community building, through on how you communicate online, your email marketing, all that stuff is a way to say, hey, join us in this moment. And that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, and you're doing a podcast here, right? I mean, verbalizing and sharing why it is that people need to buy Myles Comfort Foods and go out to that store and pick up a package or two, right, to enjoy it tonight because man, it's just going to be that ooey gooey taste and opportunity. So
Yep, exactly.
awesome, awesome. So engagement, right? You got co-packers, you got shipping, you got dealing with buyers and all these types of things, and employees and all that. So, what are some of the ways that you, Myles Powell, as the founder, are engaging with those people in your circle of influence on a daily basis, and have keeping them, engaged with the movement that you have?
Yeah, I think we have to remember that these are organizations, but they are just people, right? The person that you're talking to is a person, which means they have their own concerns, their own objectives. And so anytime we have a new relationship or an existing one, we're engaging with them on a very personal level. Like, hey, what are you concerned about? How can we help? Um, that level of personal connection just makes that business relationship flourish, right? Because now you don't see them as an objective or as an obstacle. You see them as just another person that has their own goals. And so we try to maintain positive relationships with every person or every person that's in our sphere of doing everyday business. Um, and some people do it really well, right? Just a simple check-in, like, "Hey, how's it going? Want to know if there's anything I can do to help you out." Or like asking for advice. That's a big one, right? Like for instance, buyers love when you just ask them for advice because they're used to only being asked, "Can you sell my product?" So if you show to them, "Hey, I just want your business advice on this thing. Like, what do you think would work? What wouldn't work?" It shows that you value them as people and their opinions. So and that actually helps them look at you differently than, let's say, a Coca-Cola, because they look at Coca-Cola as a giant behemoth, and it's just like, I don't, as opposed to, hey, I got to chat with Miles today. I'm looking forward to it because we're going to talk about football. We're going to talk about this, this, this. It's going to be a great conversation, a very humanistic conversation, as opposed to just like a objective business conversation, if that makes sense.
No, I love it. Right when you said humanistic, I was thinking human. Right, it's just that tie of being able to relate in a different type of way. And I love what you said too. You gave a good golden nugget there, Gulf Share Community. Rewind that and clip that because he talked about a buyer just receiving orders, right? Like, all right, buy, sell this, sell this, sell this. You're doing it on the reverse. You're asking for some insights, some knowledge, and you know what? Every human being has gone through some sort of learning curve and they feel proud that they know something. So make them feel that proud sense. And sometimes it's even, using that to be able to say, okay, hey, how do I endear myself? This is a way that I could pick up. And then by listening, you create that, great relationship as well. So last one is
Yep.
operational excellence. I'm sure that AI is not necessarily disturbing some things in the CPG space, right? Because hopefully they're not eating stuff; they're robots. But give us a little bit of kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis. What tools are you using? Are you using some sort of CRMs that really are effective? Is there some industry softwares that you've been able to think of and use, or even are you guys developing some internal things to have some integration of that?
So as we're talking to the left of my left screen, ChatGPT is open. It's open every day. It's used for a lot of different reasons. So research, right? If I have a market based question, instead of me googling insights, I'll go to ChatGPT and say, hey, what do you think of the protein trend? Send me some relevant articles, etc. Give me a breakdown of the industry, right? It's amazing for that. It's also great for building and I call it go to market strategy, right? Say you were like, hey, I got this thing I'm trying to build out, and I just want to think about the pros and cons. Provide, and then you go back and forth. It's almost like you got fractional help on your team, right? Without having actual people. Now, I wouldn't rely 100% on this because ChatGPT tends to be overly optimistic sometimes, but it is an amazing tool just to dissect ideas. Um, and then outside of that, yeah, we've got like MailChimp, we use HubSpot, we use a lot of other things as well, kind of this tool belt of ways of looking at the market and looking at sales opportunities. We use like Apollo for identifying clients, like sale, like emails and things like that. But at the end of the day, all these things are great. Our best relationships come after a phone call. and I used to hate cold calling, and I still don't really like it. But the effectiveness of getting someone on the phone is 100x compared to email communication, right? It just takes more effort.
No, yeah. I mean, even my day to day, as much as you rely on centers of influence and connections, I love getting lathered up, man, and just talking to that new person, just and disrupting Miles' day, but bringing value by disruption, right?
Hmm.
Asking the right question, and that's kind of my day to day on the commercial banking hat is. I've got to find a way. Hey, Mr. Business Owner, I've seen you in the shelves. You're very successful. I saw an article. What were your thoughts on this, or how did you develop that? And all of a sudden, it's that spark. And I'm not just saying, hey, do you need more capital? Can I help you
Hmm.
with any wealth management, all those types of things? So awesome stuff, Miles. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Go for CEO channel. Want to stay connected to the community. Go for CEO would love to know, how do we get a hold of you if they just want to, maybe there's a company that is smaller than you or bigger than you, but is thinking about, hey, partnering or being acquired and in your future plans, or there's a buyer out there that still hasn't bought some of the stuff that you want out there in the marketplace with Myles Comfort Foods. What are the great ways to connect and website and stores that you're at?
Yep. So we're on LinkedIn, full name Myles Powell. Instagram, TikTok, Myles Comfort Foods, foods with an S. That's Miles with a Y. You can find us in Whole Foods, not every Whole Foods. You're looking at the Northeast, the South. We're in the West Coast as well with Gelson's and Bristol Farms. Um, we've got a store locator on our site, milescomfortfoods.com. So type in your zip code, it'll tell you where you can find us.
Awesome, awesome. And any other inspiring words, right? My book's coming out, so shameless plug, the 4A formula, untangle any challenge and think like a CEO. So as a CEO, any final words of, man, those issues that you've come up with, and it's been a journey for you. What made you start thinking like a CEO and getting over those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge, and I think this is across any industry, is know the consumer better than they know themselves. If you know your consumer from what they like to eat for breakfast to what kind of jeans they like to what kind of Netflix shows they like, it'll put you in such a stronger position than your competitors.
Boom. All right. I got to get some special effects because that was a mic drop moment. I love that stuff. So awesome, my man. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. And, we try to have people on, 6 to 18 to maybe 24 months later and see where Miles Comfort Foods has come from. So we hope that you'll come back and be a part of the
Yeah,
Go for CEO community in the future. All right.
I'm all for it.